What's up, everybody? Figured I'd do another pickup winding video for you. This is something that you might have seen before if you're into pickups. It's called a gold foil pickup. These are some of the fancier ones and some of the older ones of a various bunch of pickups that are referred to as gold foil pickups. They were found on cheap guitars like Tesco's and Harmonies and Silvertones and things like that. The basic construction style of the pickup itself was really cheap and inexpensive, so they made up for that by making them look very fancy. These are some of the coolest looking pickups out there. It's a chrome cover with this piece of gold foil underneath the cover, hiding the bobbin so you don't see all the ugly pickupness of it. But they came out looking really cool, and they're really neat because they're tiny. They're very thin, as you can see. So you could mount this to the top of a lot of guitars without doing any routing or anything like that. So for instruments like K's and Silvertones and things like that, it lowered the cost of construction because you didn't have to pay a guy to stand there and route out pickup cavities for adjustable pickups and all that. These things just sat on the top. They sat under the strings. They're not adjustable. And because they used this steel plate as the lower flange of the bobbin, they had a bad habit of shorting out. So most of them are going to end up needing to be rewound at one point or another. I'm going to show you how I rewind them and how I put them back together. I do make one modification that I think helps the longevity of the rewind. Should last a good long time when I'm done with this one. So this is how it goes. So first things first, whenever I get a pickup in, I want to always make sure that that it actually is dead before I bother doing any rewind. As we can see, this one is a dead short. You'd be surprised. It doesn't happen often, but every once in a while somebody sends me a pickup and there's actually nothing wrong with it. There's just something wrong with their guitar wiring and they assumed it was a pickup and they send it to me. And in those cases, I just send it back. So now that we can see that the pickup actually does have a problem and needs to be rewound, first thing we've got to do is open it up. These pickups are held together with some brass rivets that are chrome plated. The tool that I think works best for these is this little tool. It's really just a pair of channel lock nail clippers for cutting nails off. But this one I bought from Stuart Mac. You can see it's a little bit damaged, but it still works for what I need. This is actually something that they sell for pulling frets out of guitars, and I just nub these off dead even with the bobbin, and it all just kind of pops apart. A little awkward because I'm doing this with one hand. I don't have my nice cameras set up today, so bear with me. Once those are out, the whole thing will come apart, as you can see. Now you can see the rivets come out, and then the rest of the pickup will come apart. Back that up a little bit. There you have it. Now, see here, this is the cover. That's just a piece of paper stuck in there, that gold foil paper, right? That's all it is. Now, the pickup itself is a black piece of plastic of some sort. I don't really know what type. It's very rigid. It's a good piece. Very thin. And then there's a magnet in there. And then on the bottom, there's this metal plate, steel plate, stuck on there. They've painted the steel plate white, I think, to insulate it, but it doesn't work very well. It ends up breaking down. And at some point, one of your ends of your pickup will short out to the other, and that's how you get the scenario we run into here, where it's short to ground. So the next step to do is to peel all this tape and wire off of this pickup. Now here we can see the way they originally connected these pickups. They solder the wiring that they use is a single conductor wire with a shielding on the outside. So they solder the conductor, the yellow wire, as we can see here, to a little piece of copper tape, and then they solder the other end of their coil. to this piece of copper tape also. And then the shielding wire they solder to the steel plate on the bottom. Then back here, they take the starting end of their coil and solder it to that little nub of steel that's sticking out off the edge of this plate, and that's how they make their end connection. It's kind of genius, but it's kind of goofy at the same time, because there's so much that can go wrong with this. I mean, there's no way this thing was going to live. Considering this pickup's probably half a century old, I guess it's done okay, but this is why these fail, because that's just a really delicate way of handling things. If any of these coils inside this thing end up shorting out against this steel plate, you've shorted it dead to ground, so it's just not a good design. Further proof that while you might like the sound of old guitars, they're really usually built pretty badly, especially the inexpensive ones. But we're going to fix it up a little bit. Alright, so that's all the wire that came off. They're using what was pretty common red wire. I call it red wire. It's this reddish, brownish kind of wire. The light's making it look redder than it is. It's almost black, really. It's very, very dark in color, but when you get it in the light, it's got this kind of reddish tint to it. Most of these pickups that I've come across have been from the early 60s. This one, I think, is from about 65 or so. And now you can see what I was talking about. It's just a magnet. I think they're ceramic magnets with a piece of plastic glued on top and that steel plate. And as you can see, it's painted white to insulate it a little bit. It's at the same time a brilliant design and just an uber cheap design. It's just glue, magnet, piece of plastic, paint. So the next step is to go ahead and throw this on the winder and put some more wire back on it. Alright, so here we are at the winder. This is my winder. You've seen it in some other videos. It's a Shop Fox lathe, little hobby wood turning lathe that I've converted into a winder. And it runs through this batch controller, and that's how that works. I program in the number of windings I want, and that's where it goes. Now I'm going to show you a little pro tip. If you've tried doing some pickup winding and you keep getting your wire snagged on the edge of your bobbins, down here on this lower edge, if you can see, I've got a piece of clear Scotch tape running across the edge of this bobbin. I've got one on the other end too, you see it? And what that does is it acts as a little ramp to get your wire to ride up and go nicely around your magnet, or whatever the center core of your bobbin happens to be. And it keeps it from snagging on the edge. If you've tried to do Fender, Stratocaster type bobbins and you keep snagging it on the edge and getting pissed off, well, this right here will save the day for you. Remember where you learned that. I'm full of all kinds of handy tips. Watch my videos. Alright, so we're all wound up. The specs on these were pretty hit and miss. They were wound with 44 gauge wire, and the resistance on them is all over the map. This particular one I am winding with 4,000 turns, and that's the standard that I tend to use for these. It gives a really good output, and it still leaves you enough room to tuck all your wiring away and tape everything up real nice. Now you remember before I told you the original wire for these was technically, it's what I call a one conductor wire, because it only has one actual conductor. The other is a shielding, so it's like a coax. You've got one wire running inside a shielding, and they're using the shielding to ground, and that's where they're getting the other side of their signal. I don't do that. I use new wire. I use two conductor wire with a braided ground, and then that is also shielded. You see the foil shielding there. So I take the grounding braid and I solder it to that little nub that I showed you earlier, and then I connect the start of the winding to the white wire and the end of the winding to the black wire, for no other reason than that helps me remember how they're wired, and if somebody asks me how to do one that's like a phase reversal with another pickup, I can remember how to do it. So let's go ahead and hook those up. So that's pretty much it for these little Rowe pickups. I have a couple others I have to rewind, and they're really cool if you want to grab one off of eBay and stick it on, you know, any guitar that you've got that you'd like to try out, a neck pickup, or These are kind of neat for like a neck pickup for a Telecaster, because you can just run the wire through it and screw it into the top using those what were the rivet holes. You can just use those like you would a P90, run 2 screws through there and hold it onto the guitar. Really cool to have. Good sounding pickup, low output, which is kind of a magic recipe for some really cool tones if you didn't already know. Talk to you later. Bye.